My name is G. Welcome to today's session on community networking and partnership building. This session builds on the influence section of our course and is geared towards leaders who need to nurture external relationships, whether it's for sales, investment, pivotal partnerships, or to build momentum to change the world. Well, our human world, because the Earth is still going to be around even after we've wrecked it. So, on that fun note, unlike other types of networking training, which will you bring you through frameworks like the stakeholder and empathy mapping, which you can find elsewhere, we'll instead focus on first principles, so you have the necessary building blocks to either shape your own strategy and development if you've never done this before, or revisit your current practice if you're a pro with some fun stories that might spark some inspiration. Either way, value for everyone. So today's session is designed to be listened to, so put it on while you're doing chores or something with a notepad or a note app nearby, so you can jot down sparks of inspiration or questions to send our way. So here's the flow of this session, and I'm sorry I said it was going to be a framework, but I needed a simple one to create a flow for the session, but I think that's reasonable. So be or feel, think and do. Now, if you're a pro, take the next 10 minutes as just a timely refresher. So be feel. Firstly, it all starts with you. So it's about who you are and how you feel about whatever bandwagon you're trying to get everyone else on board. You need substance and weight in your belief if you want people to gravitate towards you. And you can't be without feeling, and you can't feel without being. So we kind of need a new word like be feel, like I mentioned earlier. Anyway, both are important. Moving on. Here I'm referring to strategy and design of relationships. And relationship design is really important. So if you haven't yet seen the relationship design video or design culture lesson in lesson 3, you should go back and take a look. And lastly, do. It's about applied tactical skills you can try out immediately. So without further ado, let's kick off with the foundational stuff. And because I'm not sure how much you know about the topic or sales in general, so it'll be a folly to not mention the basics quickly. So firstly, relationships create scale only when nurtured. What we mean here is that some people have a phenomenal multiplier effect only over time and with trust, or you compensate them really, really well. So you need to remember to nurture those relationships, like remember their birthdays and things like that. People want to feel special. That's business 101. Pretty straightforward. Number 2, partnerships thrive when values and incentives align. Now, that's just good relationship and contract design. So if you both want the same things done in the same way, and you're both being rewarded fairly, this is a no-brainer. Number 3, a good network reflects your vision and not just your vanity. So this means, it's not who do I know, it's about who do I need to build with, or what kind of community would my vision need to survive and grow. So you got to bring it right back to purpose. And now number 4 is a bit of a weird one, where networking is a practice of empathy and not just performance. Now, you absolutely need empathy, but I think advice on this gets misinterpreted because empathy is poorly understood as being nice to others, or being nice to yourself, or just being really accommodating. And as we mentioned in lesson 5, empathy provides a lens for giving you information about somebody else and yourself. So subsequent actions come from compassion or fear or intention, and those are separate things. Right. So, for example, feelings of intimidation at big networking events or startup competitions are not an excuse not to show up or delay the inevitable connections you need to make because you're feeling really uncomfortable. So, a process for processing this, an example of thought process, I mean, for processing this kind of feelings before you take action, like intention, is like here. So, damn, I'm feeling scared. I don't think I'm ready, but it's good to observe that. This mission is really important to me. We need to find the right partner to enter this market, which only I can do. So I should really put some practice in, or call my coach, or get an advisor. As uncomfortable as this makes me, I know I need to perform to get what I want. So here you can see that self empathy gives you information to take a better course of action but it's still your intention that we should be doing the steering. So here they've said, acknowledge the feeling, and by observing that feeling, they kind of separated themselves and their thinking from what they're feeling, and come back to purpose and intention and said, but this is really important. This is really what I want. Therefore, because I'm feeling uncomfortable, I should probably go get some help. And that'll help me perform better, right? A better course of action. So empathy helps widen the information that you have. Intention is direction. So starting with the framework of be feel. Now, I didn't mention this before, but the being and the feeling is the first thing you got to do right before focusing on thinking and doing, just because it makes it so much easier. So be generous. This strategy is how I've retained and been referred to my billionaire clients. And obviously, I'm not talking about blindly giving away value or being a pushover. It's this idea that you don't always keep score. So people with a lot of power and money, man, they're so busy and everyone's always asking for money. They just need things done on time, done well. And if there's a problem, you'll fix it. So back in 2016, I met a friend. He was and is a Harvard lawyer through one of my billionaire clients, and I chose to sponsor a couple of things that he was doing. He's always been kind of a little bit late on payments here and there, but I've been forgiving. But over the course of the next 3 years of knowing him, he's given me another 2 billionaire clients. And just know they'll pay accordingly. And they pay for 2 types of trust. So the first one is confidentiality. So when to keep your mouth shut. That one should be easy. The second one is competency and being able to trust your advice, skills, and experience. And you'll get nowhere if you try and charge for every hour and every minute, for every bit of advice. Just set up a package that is generous to you so that you can be generous to others. And why this is in the be and feel section is because people with people skills can see quickly if you're someone to be trusted. So don't act like a trustworthy person. Be a trustworthy person, because, and this is sort of the second part of this little principle here, is that money will come. It's so hard to find trustworthy people who can actually get stuff done. And you hear this everywhere. That might not come from that person you're being generous to right now, but it will come from any of the generous actions you've chosen to take. So, I tapped on this earlier about smart people knowing pretty quickly if you're a trustworthy person. So that first and last impression are incredibly important. Other people feel your energy and your presence, right? And through that, you can persuade, as opposed to stepping into a conversation aiming to persuade, because people are mirrors. So the more grounded you are, the more grounded they are. So check in before stepping in to conversations. So ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? Am I feeling a bit desperate? Because I don't want to give off that energy. I want to come off as calm and clear. So, right, maybe I need to take a breath and readjust, and that'll change my presence and the feeling that I come off to other people. Now, that principle goes both ways. If you found yourself not being present and not really listening, and you need to bring your attention back to the other person so they feel heard and understood, you can mimic them. You mirror them now. So it helps to physically empathize with their subtle hand gestures, postures, tone, their pace, and it'll bring you to connection through your body, right? It'll help you focus to check in and slow down, right? So lastly, this part here is living through thought leadership. I think this one is pretty self-explanatory. You're just going to do as you say you're going to do. So when people experience meeting you, they should feel the future that you're building. So that's how I got the UN to sponsor our food festivals in places like Cambodia. We were doing waste management experiments for 3 years at the time, shared pro bono policy advising reports, built a strong reputation for being seen as caring and really do it. So when you embody your mission, you don't have to oversell. They had actually heard about us already, and they said, "Wow, we'd be very happy to drop a few K into this." But barely had to sell it. They just turned up and did it. Now, by the way, that's also how we built a community of 2,500 volunteers in Phnom Penh alone. We started putting some calls out, and people just regularly joined and it became a group. And now we painting schools, doing trash pickups. When you show them that you mean business, people just start gravitating. Now, on to think. Now, we're only going to cover design delight here because the other two are actually covered more thoroughly in other lessons. So, relationship design is where you co engineer a relationship for success at the very start. And there's a template and even a book excerpt that you can use in that lesson that's in the lesson description in lesson 3. And values to behavior is a simple 3-question exercise you should do with your team, co-founders, and your partners to get specific and on the same page by exactly what you mean by those big fluffy words like integrity and kindness and operational excellence, things that you see on websites or the company wall. So those interpreted values into behaviors are actions you take that communicate and verify that you're the real deal and why people should be following, buying from, or investing in you. So check that out. That one's in lesson 6. So we're going to focus on designing delight. This is about intentionally creating like surprising moments of care, humor, or beauty that make people feel, see, appreciated. People feel seen, appreciated, and curious, right? Now, this works because people are influenced by 2 routes. Now, there's the elaboration likelihood model developed by Richard E. Petty and John Cacioppo. I never say that right. Sorry. In the early 1980s, that explains how people process persuasive messages. So, number 1 is through the central route, which is deep, thoughtful consideration of information. It's very logical. And the peripheral route, which is more superficial, like attractiveness, authority, emotional tone, and charisma, which explains this guy, Trump, whether you like him or not. We have to agree that what he says sometimes is quite incoherent. But he got voted in twice. He's officially the second most powerful person twice. So your fancy logic doesn't always win out loud. We do need to put that somewhere. So coming back to the basics, we jump back onto a customer journey mapping, which doesn't look nice and pretty like this. It usually looks more like this, which is just process maps and arrows and things, where there's a very clear flow because it is a journey to create little pockets of delight from mundane things. So here's an example 6 years ago now, where some of our partners and our leads were getting a little slow and we needed the cash flow. So we decided to do a big 5-year anniversary celebration. And instead of sending email invitations, fairly mundane, which is what everybody does, we sent slices of cheesecake asking for a slice of their time. Where inside the invitation was a map to the event where you turned up and there's like a golden fridge. There's no signage. There's a whole map that shows you where in this facility that you got to get to. There was a golden fridge with, everything's all blacked out and a single spotlight on that gold fridge. You got to walk through it and there's music and it was beautiful. You get ice cream and churros. Now, that event helped close a bunch of deals and partnerships within that week. And as you can see here in this picture, like a screenshot of some of the conversations. I'm blanking out names, of course. But people posted it. It created this FOMO from like big business leaders in the community and people going like, what's this? Where's it going to? And we found out like where they would be at certain times. So it wasn't just to the office. It was like a total surprise. So that was very, very cool. Now for sponsorships, asking for money, we did the same thing. I just realized that my face is covering the actual email thing there, but you can take a look at the slides later. Now we had a nature-based event 9 years ago, back when people openly cared less about the environment. So almost nobody wanted to give us cash and was only in-kind services and products. So that was a real problem for us. So we were referred a person who had the cash and I had to seal the deal. So I did a bit of digging to find out what they liked and created a specific sponsorship package just for her. And I found out she loved Game of Thrones. So you'll see here there's an email that I wrote in the language of that, so-and-so, I can't say the name, obviously, from this family, first in line to your throne leader, or, all these things. And we created a scroll, actually, with a red stamp seal, delivered it to her in person. She was blown away by it. And after the event, we gave her this trash throne that you can see in the picture that's made of actual recycled clean waste. So from the trash pickups that we did, we cleaned these bottles and stuff, and then we made it into that. And in the end, she gave us some. Here in the email, I asked for 2 times the money, but in the end, she gave 3 times the money we asked for because, again, the delight factor. We said, how do we turn that up? Not just give her a throne, but we arranged a choir to sing the Game of Thrones theme song, and organized for like four buff, naked dudes to walk out the winner of a trash art competition, and we recorded the whole thing, and she loved it. And then a few months later, even actually offered to invest in the company. Right? So that was really cool. So our framework for doing that is through mapping every touch point and designing delight as select parts that we think are winning areas. You can do it across the whole journey, of course, but then it's like way too much. Wow, you only have content for years actually after this. So there's a lesson specifically about people journey mapping with empathy in lesson 10. So you go check that out. Now, finally, we're at the do part of this. With the first thing you have to work on is improve the quality of your listening. So personally, I turn to the discipline of coaching to check in if I'm really listening well. So that's a self-empathy exercise to see how well you're connecting with the people you're trying to build community or partnerships with. So level one is where you're listening to kind of like your own voice and your own thinking, like, why does this matter to me? How does this affect me? And typically you're here when you react to someone with advice, assumptions, judgment, sympathy, or the best one is responding with your own story to their story, and the whole conversation is a little bit disjointed. Now, unfortunately, we practice such poor listening that this is kind of normal. So just know that this is level one. Level two is where you're listening to kind of recall. So this is kind of like schoolwork where you repeat back what you heard. You whether it's body language or the message or tone. This is like basic school 101, which doesn't teach you how to have great listening, but that's level two, remembering what was said. Level three is where you're listening to understand. You're starting to ask questions a bit better, like, hey, what is their issue? How can this problem be solved? And you really begin to understand the other person's problem and potential ways to solve the problem. So this is a bit similar with reacting to advice, like I just mentioned in level one. But the difference with level one advisory is that you get interrupted before you even finish typically. Whereas at level three, there's significantly more silence and there's much more like question asking. You're asking questions now. And finally, at level four, where you want to be, is listening to connect with your heart, your head, your body, and you're wondering how they're feeling. And this is much deeper, and you know you're there because you can name accurately what they're feeling at the time. So you're picking up information about what isn't being said, what else is going on, and whatever else your intuition is picking on. And I've had type A founders and leaders cry to me during consultations and sessions that were not therapy sessions. They just kind of became that way because I could cut through what they were saying out loud to touch on what they were really feeling. And once we get to that vulnerable, real state, we get real honesty about where their business really is, about their state, how they're really fitting. And from there, that place of truth, we can devise a better strategy based on where step one actually looks like. Now, in my experience, I've noticed this as like fairly negative, defensive, like conflict type of energy. So when I'm feeling that from somebody, that's typically where I feel like they're almost fighting with themselves. There's something not being said here. Let's try and figure out what that feeling is. And I typically just broach it and say, hey, I'm picking this up. Is this what you're feeling at the moment? And at that point, you'll figure out how safe they feel. So if you can make them feel this safe, I can tell you, man, you've earned their trust for life. So practice your listening. Next up is body storming or fun storming. So body storming, like brainstorming, it's with your body. It's more fun, which is why we call it fun storming. Now, the best example I can think of is with Patricia Moore, who's been dubbed the mother of universal design. Now, back in 1979, Patricia Moore visited 116 US and Canadian cities, dressed up as an old person when she was 26, and experienced all the restrictions and the negative and outside perceptions that an elderly person goes through. She taped her joints, wore thick glasses, muffled her hearing with earplugs, wore awkward shoes to limit her movement so she could better understand the challenges of aging in an urban environment. And she took all those findings and recreated tons of like utensils and things like potato peelers and wayfinding for elderly people, and it significantly improved the experience for older people. And she's made a lot of money for people doing this. Now, one more lesson I'll add into this part here, because I realize that we're talking about doing and not necessarily designing, is that it's best to experience this delight with your partner or the funder or whatever for yourself, with the user. Now, be there with them in that moment if you can and if it's appropriate, so that they have the opportunity to connect with you, laugh with you, and bond with you. So brainstorming and fun storming is not limited to the design phase. Be there with them, which takes me to the last point, is that you gotta show up even at that point. So this one I think is pretty self-explanatory. I'll just add in that you do need to show it, because you won't be able to activate smart luck if people didn't know it was you, or didn't connect an event or a launch or something happening with you. You got to stay top of mind. And that's what we call smart luck, because luck just is a bit random. It turns up. But if you haven't shown up or told people about it, they couldn't connect it with you, then you can't take that opportunity. Right. So that is officially the end of this part of the content. Now, I will add like a secret tip, and it's a bit more of a negative one, but the story is a bit of a negative one. But I will say that you need to systemize good intel, because across all those things that you mentioned before, you need to know who that you need to talk to. You got to like figure out where they are, what they need, what motivates them. That's all intel. So branching out, speaking to people in different sectors and industries, having coffee with people fairly often to find out what's going on at the policy level, what's going on with that particular sector industry, what's going on in that company. You want to know. And one thing that we did, if you're using networking to gain leads, is to make great friends that you can trust. Now, one thing that I've done in the past in a new market where we had no portfolio, no history, is that we've gotten a co-founder a role somewhere else as a like a group marketing manager, and it got us referrals and projects. In fact, it got us like 4 contracts within a year of placing that person there. But we needed to have known that the position was up. We needed to know what was like there was a little bit more around it to get that person there. But it was one of these tactics that we did to do. It's not a great one, corporate espionage in a way, but it is. You need intel, and I don't want to leave you guys here on that note. So. If there's anything that I leave you with, and if you got none of this last 22 minutes, then I'll summarize this into one word, and it's care. You need to give a shit. So whoever you're listening to or serving in on that day or trying to connect with, be present, show that you care. It's the best way to build trust. Show your generosity, exercise your empathy, and design delight. It's care. So with that ends this lesson on building community, networking, and partnerships. And I wish you all a bit of space to slow down a little to have a great day. Thank you very much for listening.